Ukrainian commander has said that the army has laser weapons at its disposal and already deploys these weapons to strike certain targets. Vadym Sukharevsky, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, told Radio Liberty on Monday that Ukraine was using laser technologies that are now already hitting certain objects at a certain height. In December last year, Sukharevsky said Ukraine had developed Tryzub Trident laser weapon that can already shoot down aircraft at an altitude of more than 2 kilometers. Sukharevsky said that Ukraine could be the fifth country to use a working military laser system. Back then, he did not clarify what the source of the system was, however naming it after Ukraine's national trident symbol suggests the weapon was produced domestically rather than being acquired from another country. Last year, former British Defence Secretary Grant Shapps announced plans to transfer DragonFire laser weapons to Ukraine. In his words, the British Army would have this weapon in service by 2027, noting that the weapon was not ready for use on the battlefield for the time being, but would be suitable for the use in a conflict with Russia. Moscow condemns any Western assistance to Kiev, believing that this will only protract the war and will not change its outcome. Russia, US, China, UK, France, Germany and Israel have laser weapons and are involved in their development. Russian President Vladimir Putin first spoke about laser weapons during his address to the Federal Assembly in 2018. Namely, he mentioned Peresvet complex, designed to cover strategically important objects and capable of suppressing spacecraft.
Russia's medical system is likely stretched to its limit as soldiers on crutches are increasingly seen on the front lines, Business Insider reports, citing British intelligence. According to the UK Ministry of Defence, there have been numerous sightings of wounded Russian troops returning to battle as the medical system is overwhelmed. An intelligence report released Sunday said it is highly likely that wounded Russian troops are being returned to combat missions in Ukraine with non-healing wounds, often on crutches. In particular, the 20th Combined Arms Army is mentioned, which, according to British intelligence, could form assault groups from wounded soldiers. There is a realistic possibility that Russian commanders are directing these activities to support personnel who would otherwise be lost in an overburdened medical system, the report said. The British Defence Ministry also cites Ukrainian estimates that 830,000 Russian soldiers were killed or wounded during the war, of whom about 400,000 require treatment outside the combat zone. The report states wounded soldiers were likely returned to their units after being prematurely discharged from forward medical stations as directed by their commanders. This practice, according to the intelligence community, reduces the burden on the overburdened military medical system and improves the unit's ability to track and utilize wounded soldiers for operational purposes. In addition, the report notes that the lack of adequate medical care in facilities located further from the front lines necessitates the transfer of administrative and medical burdens back to military units. The British assessment of the situation emerged after video footage was published on Ukrainian Telegram channels showing Russian troops on crutches in a forested area near Pokrovsk. Other videos showed wounded soldiers complaining about the conditions of their deployment. In mid-January, Ukrainian sources released drone footage showing 2 soldiers on crutches in an open field near Pokrovsk. The drone dropped ammunition on them, likely rendering them incapacitated. However, it remains unknown what injuries these soldiers sustained before the drone strike, or whether they were involved in combat or simply moving between positions. The footage has also sparked debate in Russia. Military blogger Svyatoslav Golikov harshly criticized the practice of sending wounded soldiers to the front lines in a post in January, calling it a complete disgrace. In particular, egregious cases, obvious cripples, can even be sent to storm, but more often they are sent to strengthen newly won positions, he added. Golikov suggested that the soldiers in the video were without equipment and weapons because Russian soldiers often have to find equipment on their own at the front. The backlash against the treatment of the wounded intensified after another video was released in mid-January showing a man in military uniform beating 2 wounded Russians with a baton and using a stun gun on them. Authorities in Kyiv told Russian media that they had launched an investigation into the incident. Signs of a lack of resources in the Russian military are becoming increasingly obvious as the war turns into a competition in which Kiev and Moscow try to outdo each other in troop numbers and weapons stockpiles. To bolster the ranks, the Kremlin is increasing bonuses and social benefits for new recruits, and in some regions, cash incentives for contract soldiers have almost equaled American military pay. In 2025, Russia plans to allocate almost a third of its federal budget to defense, 13.5 trillion rubles, approximately $135 billion, which is happening against the backdrop of the country's economic isolation due to Western sanctions.
Former Syrian Interior Minister Lieutenant General Mohammed Ibrahim al-Shar has turned himself to the country's interim government. A photograph circulated on social media on Tuesday showed the former minister sitting inside a security forces vehicle after his surrender. Al-Shar served as Syria's Minister of Interior from 2011 to 2018, and headed the military police and chief of Branch 227 of military intelligence in Damascus in 2006. He is accused of suppressing a prison uprising at Saydnaya prison in 2008, during which over 20 inmates were killed. Since mid-2011, the former minister has been under Western sanctions. He has denied committing any crimes that would warrant prosecution under the new leadership. Al-Shar's surrender is a significant development in Syria's transition phase after the opposition forces seized power by ousting long-standing President Bashar al-Assad in 2014.
تم الاستلام من قبل الأخ فرج الحمود ومنيف الزعيم القداح بس مشان يعني تكون الأمور حسب يعني القانون والضوابط المتفق عليها ونحفظ كرامة الرجل وإن شاء الله تعالى ما راح نقصر لكل أي شخص بحب يعني يتم تسليم نفسه للسلطات أو الجهات المعنية في الدولة الجديدة سوريا. الأخ فرج الحمود.
حياكم الله، تحياتي لك أبو إسحاق.